Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. The Premier League season is over and we're going to be going through a Premier League review. We're going to be going from the bottom of the table to the top of the table through all the 20 teams that finished in those positions, talking about each team's season and what maybe may happen next season. Before we go any further though in talking about all of that, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things always would be greatly appreciated. And I also encourage you as well to get involved in the comments section as well. I'm sure you'll all have plenty of thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, on the Premier League, the season that has been, the crazy and wild season it has been. And I'm sure it'll all make for interesting and great reading down below in the comment section. But for now, without further ado, let's get on with the review. Sat rock bottom of the table is Southampton. I don't want to go too much into Southampton because I did do a video on them when they got relegated a few weeks ago. So do go check that out if obviously you want to hear more of my thoughts, comments and opinions and things on Southampton. But to simply put it in a nutshell, just simply not good enough. A season in which they were young, inexperienced, failed to score goals, failed to defend, and ultimately it's a recipe for disaster when you put those two things especially together. They couldn't make their home a fortress. They went through about 3 different new managers across the entire season. There was no structure, there was no discipline. It was a bit of a disaster all in all for Southampton, and rightfully so. They're going back down this season. We also say goodbye to Leeds this season, who finished in 19th. They're going back down to the Championship. They couldn't survive again. Went through a couple of new managers themselves across this season, but ultimately a string of poor performances, bad results, and just ultimately again a lack of goal scoring, conceding way too many goals, whether it was under Jesse Marsch at the beginning of the season, under Javi Gracia in the middle of the season, or at the back end of the season under Sam Allardyce. Even Sam Allardyce couldn't keep this Leeds side up, couldn't, obviously with 4 games to go under his reign. Next season, of course, you may look at it and say that Leeds may be in a good position to bounce straight back up with a squad that they have, the knowledge of the Championship they have, but I think it would depend on who their manager is. And the last side to be leaving the Premier League this season is Leicester. Massively underperformed this season have Leicester. Brendan Rodgers saw his side just go stale and deteriorate across the season, and then not even Dean Smith could save the Foxes from the end of the campaign. With the squad that they have, you would expect them maybe to bounce up next season, but the question really is, will they manage to keep that squad intact? Obviously, there are some key players there, and some big players at that are going to be leaving Leicester this summer, and I would expect more as well. Yuri Tillemans is going to be leaving them on a free transfer. Patson Daka, Jamie Vardy and Kelechi Iheanacho are 3 players that obviously make up Leicester's strike force, but could they be on the move and on the way out of the King Power Stadium in search of maybe Premier League football going forward? And then of course there's James Maddison, a top quality player who I'm sure a lot of Premier League clubs have on their radar. Big summer, big questions for Leicester. They definitely could bounce back at the first time of trying, but the Championship is not as easy as maybe it once was when they were back down there last time. In 17th, we see Everton, who just managed to survive by the skin of their teeth. Sean Dyche managed to accomplish his mission this campaign, which was maintain Everton's status for another season. Obviously, coming in part way through the season for Frank Lampard, and despite obviously Frank Lampard's, I guess you'd say, efforts in trying to obviously maintain the Premier League status, it wasn't going very well, and so they called in reinforcements. They called in a tried and trusted Sean Dyche, and he managed to achieve what they wanted of him, what they expected of him. Highlight of the season clearly was that 5-1 victory over Brighton. That was seen as the main catalyst to why Everton and how Everton survived towards the end of the campaign. Where do they go from here going forward? Look, there's no doubt about it, in my opinion, that Everton could build something with Sean Dyche and make them a bit of a strong and tough and disciplined outfit for the rest of the Premier League going forward. Similar to how he did with Burnley. But then again, you dance with the devil too long, it may be a matter of time before he eventually gets you. So we'll have to wait and see what the future holds for Everton in future campaigns. But at least for one more season, Everton survive. In 16th, we see Nottingham Forest. Now, this is quite a year for the newly promoted teams, because this, I think, is the first ever season in which all three of the newly promoted teams have managed to survive in the Premier League for their second season back. Fair play to Nottingham Forest, done an absolute incredible job. And again, I won't go too much into detail on Forest because I did do a video on them when they did survive and they officially survived. So I'll just say, fantastic job by Forest, fantastic job by the club, the manager, the players, and especially the fans as well, who have been loud and have been incredible all season. Steve Cooper's done a fantastic job. It could have been very easy for the club to have got rid of him at any moment during this campaign, but they stuck with him and they're reaping the rewards right now of maintaining their Premier League status for another season. A fantastic job by Nottingham Forest. Finishing 15th, we see Bournemouth, and again another newly promoted team that survived this season. Gary O'Neill deserves insane amounts of credit. Everybody had Bournemouth to go down at the beginning of the season. Nobody had them within a chance of surviving. And then especially when Scott Parker left after the absolute 9-0 thrashing at the hands of Liverpool, people were saying Bournemouth, if they weren't done and dusted by then, were then dead and buried. And they were not having any opportunity in staying up whatsoever. Gary O'Neill comes in and suddenly Bournemouth transform into a side that are picking up points here and there and putting together a truly big survival bid to the point where they survived, albeit considering pretty comfortably towards the end of the campaign. He's done a fantastic job. I think he deserves a huge amount of credit, and I definitely think he should have been considered as being manager or one of the managers of the season, at least in terms of nominations and everything, because I think he's done an incredible job. Fair play to Bournemouth, fair play to their fans. Can they survive for another season? Obviously, time will tell on that. It's going to be a big transfer window for everybody involved, especially down there in the relegation battle for the next campaign. But for now, Bournemouth can savour this season and be thankful that they have maintained their Premier League status for another year. In 14th, we see West Ham. Kept their heads above water. It's been a bit of an underperforming season, I guess you'd say, in terms of the league and domestically in comparison to seasons gone by, because obviously they've had a lower position than what they've been used to. A couple of 7th place finishes in the past couple of seasons, and then this time around they live in 14th. But their season isn't over yet. They still have a Europa Conference League final to contend with, and that is going to be massive for West Ham and for David Moyes. And so their season can actually be even better than what it currently is right now. And let's face it, a European trophy, they'll be better than anyone in London this season. There'll be a better season than anybody in London this season if obviously they can get a trophy. Maybe not so much Arsenal, who have got Champions League football to contend with next season, but a European trophy will be better than Tottenham, obviously, better than Chelsea, better than a lot of other teams in Europe, and of course they can then gain entry into next season's Europa League. So it's not all over for West Ham yet. They've still got one more game to contend with for this campaign, but fair play to David Moyes for obviously managing to balance Premier League survival and battling for a European trophy that could create some history for this West Ham side. In 13th, we have Wolves. Got a little bit under the radar of Wolves this season. They had a couple of managers here and there across the campaign, and I don't think they scored that many goals either. I think they had one of the lowest scoring records in the division, but have still somehow managed to survive. It's baffling to me. They've gone a bit under the radar, like I say. But no, fair play for survival once again. Wolves, hit and miss, inconsistent throughout the entirety of the season, but managed to secure a 13th place finish. Make of that whatever you will, but they'll be in the Premier League again for next season. In 12th place, and in a position that nobody saw coming in their wildest imagination, is Chelsea. The circus known as Chelsea Football Club continues to roll on, and a 12th place finish is what they managed to secure this season. No one expected them to be in the bottom half of the table. No one expected them to be this far down, especially after spending all of that money and all of the kind of media buzz that was surrounding Todd Boehly and this whole Chelsea project. But, and this is a massive point to make here, this could just be the beginning. This might be the step back Chelsea needed to see how they were running things to then go forward. And I believe that Chelsea will go forward, and of course they've already started putting their wheels in motion for next season. They've officially now appointed Mauricio Pochettino. Manuel Ugarte seems to be agreed, and so he seems to be on the fast track to Chelsea as well. They're seemingly putting the plans and building blocks already in motion for next season. Maybe one game a week may help Chelsea in claiming their goal back. I think their initial goal will obviously be to get back into the Champions League with all the money that they've spent. So that could benefit Chelsea as well in the long run. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Chelsea next season. But for now, a 12th place finish. We can banter them whilst they're down, but things might just start picking up for the Blues in the coming years. In 11th, we've got Crystal Palace. Big year for Palace, a bit of a strange year as well. Patrick Vieira started off the season okay. Got a bit crazy in the middle. They couldn't buy a win for love nor money. And then Roy Hodgson comes in. And I was there sat thinking, why would you do that? Why would you go back to Roy Hodgson after spending so much time trying to change the club? Be a bit more current, be a bit more modern with a Patrick Vieira managerial appointment. Then go back to the old-fashioned ways of Roy Hodgson. And suddenly, what the hell do I know? Roy Hodgson starts winning games with Crystal Palace 5-0 and 3-1 and starts scoring plenty of goals, and Palace are safe before you know it. It's been a crazy year for Palace. It'd be interesting to see what they do going forward. They have a very good squad. Does Hodgson decide to stay? Does someone else decide to come in and take over the reins? It'll be very interesting to see what Palace do from here. But they've got a very good squad building up there, a very young and decent squad. And maybe they can use this as a platform to push on with. Maybe they can go on and challenge for European football in the future. Maybe they can go on and maybe put together some sort of cup run here and there maybe. It'd be interesting to see what the future holds for Crystal Palace. But a solid mid-table finish is what has happened with the Eagles this season. In 10th sees Fulham, the third of the newly promoted sides in this. Again, a solid mid-table finish. Marco Silva deserves huge amounts of praise, credit and recognition for getting his Fulham side to this point and to this mid-table finish. Again, it's been brilliant for them to watch. They've been very physical, they've been very direct, but they've also mixed it up with some good technical play and some good playing out from the back kind of football. They've been a challenge this season for a lot of Premier League sides. They're a bit inconsistent towards the middle and towards the end, but for the most part, it was their strong start to the season that got them to this far, and they deserve huge amounts of credit for obviously staying up in the division and being obviously a thorn in the sides of many of the clubs in this division as well. Brilliant by Marco Silva. Alexander Mitrovic, despite obviously his antics in the FA Cup, which saw him ruled out for about 8 games or so towards the end of the campaign, scored plenty of goals and actually took to the Premier League well. There were big question marks over him at the beginning of the season, and some of the new signings like João Palhinha, for example, took to the Premier League very, very well and are seemingly on the radars of some of the bigger clubs in England's top flight division. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Fulham going forward and some of their players, and whether or not they can strengthen in the summer transfer window ahead of next season. 9th place is Brentford. Thomas Frank's Brentford. Fantastic season for them. Fantastic year for them. Fantastic overall standing in the end for the Bees. been great. They've had this kind of mid-table sort of standing for a while. It was unfortunate that they couldn't push on any further towards challenging for some sort of European football, simply for the reason that a bit of inconsistency crept into their play towards the end of the campaign. But I think at one point during the middle of the season, they were on some sort of 12-13 game unbeaten run, and then the inconsistency kind of crept in. Unfortunately, they couldn't push on from this, but this is a very good platform for Thomas Frank and his side to build upon for next season. Obviously, the absence of Ivan Toney is going to be hitting them a little hard from now until January, of course, when obviously the season resumes again. But I'm sure they'll come up with a plan. I'm sure they'll strengthen in the summer, and I'm sure they'll continue to build on the squad that they have, and to use whatever limited resource and limited financial matter they have in a very, very wise way. And I'm very sure of that. And I'm sure that Thomas Frank will continue to become a very good manager going forward. And I'm sure that Brentford will only go from strength to strength from this. And I hope to see them challenging for some sort of European football for next season. But for now, very good, very solid 9th place finish for the Bees. In 8th place, we have Tottenham Hotspur. Oh, I could go on for ages about Tottenham Hotspur this season, and I pretty much have done already, but I could still say more about this side. I started off the season with Antonio Conte. Had a lot of hope and optimism going into it. The transfer window seemingly bringing in about 6 or 7 different players that seemingly had Spurs fans very excited about what the season could hold for them, with a world-class manager at the helm, with their squad being beefed up a little bit, and then it all fell apart. Now, admittedly, I did have Spurs as finishing 3rd in my predictions, but Jesus Christ, if I went through my entire predictions, I pretty much got, I think, 2 right, maybe at most. Maybe not even that. But at the same time, I think a lot of other people also did have Spurs finishing inside the top 4. And then it all fell apart. I think they had their best start to a Premier League season ever. And then it all fell apart from there. Spurs began to feel the tiniest bit of pressure and crumbled. And then Conte was coming out in press conferences, calling out his players. And the players crumbled yet again. And everybody was crumbling around them. And it all fell apart. And the fact that they're even 8th is incredible. And obviously, with Stellini coming in for a couple of games and then Ryan Mason taking charge at the end of the season, it showed that Daniel Levy did not have a plan going forward post Antonio Conte. He just wanted to get rid of Conte, and then he was improvising seemingly along the way. One person I do feel sorry for, well, sort of feel sorry for, is Harry Kane. 30 goals this season in the Premier League. Fantastic achievement. If it wasn't for a certain Norwegian goal scorer for Manchester City, he would be being talked about a hell of a lot more than what he is. But unfortunately, Haaland does exist. Not only that, but it's his goals that have got Spurs to this point. And I say that I kind of feel sorry for him. If he'd have made more of an effort to leave, he could be on the verge of winning trophies, playing the Champions League, that kind of thing by now. But he seems to be happy at Spurs. He seems to have this Stockholm Syndrome sort of deal with Spurs right now. So I guess I don't feel sorry for him. He kind of made his choice. But we'll have to see, obviously, what the summer brings. As far as what Spurs are going forward, a complete mess. We do not actually know what is going to be happening with Spurs going forward. We don't even know who their new manager is going to be. We don't know anything about what's going to happen with the Spurs side going forward. They are entering into the unknown as we are looking at them entering into the unknown, because the people that are in power do not know what they are doing, it seems. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Spurs, but it's going to make for interesting and great reading if you're a rival fan or if you're just a neutral who doesn't really care about them, like myself. So let's see what happens. Coming in at 7th, Aston Villa. Now, at the beginning of the season, I don't think anyone predicted Aston Villa to get any form of European football, but that is exactly what happened. I don't think anybody actually predicted them to get any European football midway through the season either, when Steven Gerrard was seemingly finding it too hot to handle at Villa as far as he was concerned. But Unai Emery came in and instantly took to the job and did a fantastic job at that. He got Villa to be a strong, disciplined outlet from the back, and managed to get even the likes of Ollie Watkins on some good scoring form. And overall, that contributed to Villa climbing the table at a rapid pace for many weeks, in which they found themselves in contention of European football. And then on the final day of the season, a win against Brighton saw Villa secure themselves 7th place and in next season's Europa Conference League. A fantastic achievement by Unai Emery, by Aston Villa. And let's face it, Villa fans, Europa Conference League, you see how well West Ham are doing it this season. Imagine what it's going to be like next season for your lot to be in it. Good squad. And a manager notorious for winning the Europa League, which is the 2nd tier rather than the 3rd tier. Maybe, just maybe, Europa Conference League glory might be coming to Villa Park next season. That could be very intriguing to see, obviously. But let's see how things happen. A fantastic season by Aston Villa in the end. And Unai Emery and Villa will continue to go forward and strengthen. And I'm sure go from strength to strength. There you go. In 6th place, we have Brighton. A fantastic season by Brighton. They've got Europa League. They're in European football. Fantastic season. Made even better by the fact that this club just simply doesn't know how to crumble. This club doesn't know how to feel sorry for themselves. They get setback after setback and they just strengthen. They just move on. They just get better somehow. This club are incredibly well run. This club saw in the summer 2 of their biggest players in Yves Bissouma and Marc Cucurella go, and they just went, that's fine, we'll just bring in these 2 guys to fill in their spots. And they did. And they did brilliantly. Partway through the season, they see Graham Potter and a number of their backroom staff jump ship to Chelsea. And they go, that's fine, we'll just bring in De Zerbi, and we'll bring in his guys, and this guy, and this guy, and we'll plug that gap, we'll fill that void. And they move on, and they go from strength to strength. And then they end the season in 6th. A fantastic achievement, a brilliant achievement. Fell off a little bit towards the end of the season. I think maybe they ran out of steam a little bit. Maybe their squad was just a little bit thin in the end. But I'm sure European football will be a bit of a pull for them. De Zerbi will be a bit of a pull for them going forward in the summer. And maybe they can strengthen, or they will definitely have to strengthen their squad going forward into European competition and playing more than 1 game a week. But they're a well-run club. Their transfers, 9 times out of 10, are on point. Their recruitment is brilliant. I'm jealous at how well run of a football club they are, and I think they're simply fantastic, and they are deservingly in some sort of European football this season, and I hope to see them get better in the future. Just outside the top 4 in 5th, we see Liverpool. Now, obviously underperformed this season heavily from where they were expected to be at the beginning of the season, challenging Manchester City. But of course, it wasn't to be. They've suffered badly this season. They've underperformed. And ultimately, that's why they fell out of the top 4 this season. They were helped a little bit by their end of season form. Klopp tweaked a few things here and there that got them playing some better football again and got them some better results, especially away from home. But at the same time, it wasn't enough, unfortunately, to catch one of Manchester United or Newcastle, who are in the places above them. So it's Europa League football for next season for Liverpool, but it is a massive transfer window at that as well. That Klopp and FSG in particular need to get right. We've already seen some protests against FSG. They need to really pull their finger out this season and help and give Klopp everything that they have in order to try and rebuild Liverpool again. Minimum next season is top 4 and kind of hit the reset button a little bit in terms of that regard. Challenging for the title, challenging for the Europa League, challenging for some sort of cup again next season has to be priority as well. So it's going to be a massive summer for Liverpool, massive season. They weren't too far away in the end, but it still isn't good enough for this side that, of course, a year ago was challenging for the quad. In 4th place, Newcastle United. Again, I don't think anybody saw this coming. Eddie Howe's side 18 months ago were trying to battle out of the relegation zone, trying to maintain their Premier League status. Fast forward 18 months, and Eddie Howe has managed to get Newcastle into the Champions League. Champions League football next season is returning to St James's Park for the first time in 20 years, and it is well deserved. Newcastle have been phenomenal all season. They've been strong. They've been brilliantly defensively. They've been great going forward. They even overrid a bit of a bumpy patch in the middle of the season, which results weren't going their way. They were a bit inconsistent, and then a few key players stepped up and stood up when it mattered most and managed to steer the ship away from uncertainty, maintain the ship kind of thing. And Newcastle were brilliant throughout. Fantastic achievement, and they're yet to dig really into their money. I said this in the video that I did. Newcastle have spent their money wisely. Newcastle have spent their money in a smart way. Newcastle have spent their money in ways that they probably should have been doing before the kind of takeover and the Saudi consortium and everything came in. But they've just done it now. And I think they've done a brilliant job, and I think it's time to get even more excited. They've obviously accelerated their plans quickly. It's time to get even more excited, Newcastle fans, because I reckon it's going to be a massive transfer window for you all up this summer, and I cannot wait to see, from the outside looking in, what kind of plans and ambitions that this Newcastle side has going forward, especially with Champions League football now as a pull for the Toon Army. Could be very interesting going forward. In third, Manchester United. Erik ten Hag deserves huge amounts of credit for what he's managed to achieve with this United side this season, getting them back into the top four and back into the Champions League for next season. I hate to admit it, obviously with them being United, me being a Liverpool fan, but he's done brilliantly well this season with the squad that he's had to get them to this stage. I don't think they've been entirely convincing for the majority of the season, but at the same time, he has instilled this winning mentality into this side where even when they're not performing well, they still manage to get the job done. And that is a massive trait to ingrain in any side, because those are the kind of results that eventually make champions. I'm not saying United will become champions of England again someday soon, but at the same time, it is still a good trait to have, that you can still win games when you're not even performing well. Hope and optimism are on the horizon, especially in the form of a new takeover, a new era at Manchester United that is seemingly getting closer, but obviously will need to accelerate if United are to really understand and have a clear vision of what their summer plans may have in store for them in the preparation for next season. But for now, enjoy third place, enjoy Champions League football, and we'll wait and see what the future holds for this United side. But full praise to Erik ten Hag, full praise to United. They've been very, very good all season. In second place, Arsenal. We know the story. It's been well documented all season. Arsenal did bottle it towards the end of the campaign. I'm sorry to say it, but they did. You can't be bottling games against the likes of Southampton. The 2-0 against Liverpool, 2-0 up against West Ham, losing to Brighton. If you want to be title contenders and you want to keep on continuing the battle with Manchester City, you can't be losing them games. But if you were to take the first 3 quarters of this season, they were brilliant. The first 3 quarters of the season, they were phenomenal. Arsenal were the best side in this Premier League, and hence why they held on to the top spot for so long. I think a bit of inexperience, I think a bit of bottling and cracking under the pressure kind of contributed to obviously Arsenal's downfall in the end. But if they can get that right in the summer, if they can add a bit more experience, if they can beef up their squad a little bit, especially with having Champions League football for next season, maybe they can go again for the next campaign. I think some sort of big silverware next season needs to be on the cards. They need to win something for the next campaign. It's been a few years since Arsenal last won anything, especially under Arteta, and their fans, despite saying for years that they obviously wanted to be in a title race, being in a title race this season wasn't good enough. And I understand that you can't be as far as what you were, bottle it and expect to be still positive. I get that. But at the same time, they still need to do something next season in terms of win some sort of silverware, get far in the Champions League, maybe something along those lines to really appease these fans even more so. It's a massive year for Arsenal. It's a massive year for Mikel Arteta. And it's going to be very interesting to see it all unfold before our very eyes. But there's a fair few positives for Arsenal to take from this campaign, aside from obviously the collapse at the end, the improvement of the likes of Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, those kind of players, the improvement of. But there are also some areas where you can identify and think maybe we need to improve upon for the next campaign. Massive campaign for Arsenal. Unfortunately, didn't end the way that they hoped, but a lot of hope for the future campaigns to come. And finally, in top spot, we all know this, the Premier League champions for the 3rd year in a row, Manchester City. Again, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, and I think it's brilliantly game managed by Pep across this season. He knew it was going to be a massively long campaign. He knew it was going to be a very weird and wacky campaign, especially with having the World Cup in the middle of it all. He played it to perfection. He managed to bed in the likes of Erling Haaland and Julian Alvarez, improve the likes of Jack Grealish, switch up the system a little bit to put John Stones more into a midfield role. He did all of that in a season that was seen as Man City's transition period and still managed to get them to a point where they are on the verge of completing massive amounts of history. Not only have they done the three-peat, not only have they won their 3rd Premier League trophy on the bounce, but they are on the verge of winning the FA Cup as well, and on the verge of maybe winning their first Champions League in a couple of weeks' time when they take on Inter Milan. Pep Guardiola and Manchester City have been absolutely phenomenal this season. Erling Haaland spearheading the attack. There were a lot of question marks over whether he could bed into this City squad. He took to it like a duck to water. Like I say, the improvements of the likes of Jack Grealish, Phil Foden continuing his fine form, Kevin De Bruyne being as strong as ever in that midfield, Gundogan being a bit of an unsung hero in that midfield, Rodri being incredible in that DM role, the likes of Akanji coming in and very rarely putting a foot wrong, Nathan Ake being seriously improved, and like I say, Ruben Diaz being as strong as ever, and John Stones adapting to his new role in a more midfield-like position. The transition of the City side is scary because this is only the beginning. I said this before and I'll say it again. This is only the beginning of City evolving. And when they evolve even further, and they'll probably strengthen again in the summer, and I think they'll need to strengthen again in the summer, considering obviously how Arsenal took them to great lengths this season, how Liverpool took them to great lengths in previous years, the improvement of teams that's going to happen this campaign, with obviously United's takeover on the verge of being completed, allegedly. Liverpool obviously coming back next season. Chelsea continuing to spend money. Arsenal, like I say, maybe continuing to strengthen and all that. They'll need to strengthen again. They'll need to go again in the summer. And I think that Pep will just stay one step ahead of everybody and continue to strengthen, continue to find ways to improve, and continue to find ways of being, like I say, one step ahead of the rest of the competition. And I think that's brilliant from him, brilliant from City. And like I say, they are worthy Premier League champions this season. And like I say, if they complete the big treble as well, phenomenal history being made, incredible history being made. Fair play to Manchester City and Pep Guardiola. But there's still 2 games of their season left to play. They still have to go and do it all. Whether they will or not remains to be seen. And that is, of course, all the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, of this guy. I don't know what you guys think. What do you make of this season that has been and gone in the Premier League, the 2022-23 season? What are your own thoughts, your comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, on this wild and very long season? I'm sure they'll make for interesting and great reading down below in the comment section, I'm sure. Otherwise, hit the like button on the way if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things are always very greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video. And I'll see you all again soon in another video.